Four Knights of the Apocalypse chapter 147 is out, and this was probably the best chapter in the last few, because not only did we get some nice pure Sixtus action and some nice wholesome family vibes, but the ending of this chapter literally left us off on a massive cliffhanger, and also a big prediction I had a couple of weeks ago is 100% correct, and I cannot wait to get into that as we get later on into this chapter. But before we get into things, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell for updates on future videos. Really helps, and it shows you guys enjoy the content I make here on the channel and shows you want to see more. This arc finally seems to be wrapping up as things are hitting their climax, and I cannot wait to see how this whole thing is going to end. But with all that out of the way, let's get right into this chapter. So chapter 147 of Four Knights of the Apocalypse, titled The Difference in Power. And the cover image is of Diane, as well as multiple different instances of Diane throughout her life in the Seven Deadly Sins manga, so just a whole page of nostalgia. Two images on this, I'm like, you didn't need to include that, but everything else, cute and wholesome. Love it. We start off from where last week left us, as Myrtle then collapses to the ground after recovering from the curse that made him into a horrific monster. He starts coughing due to the fairy realm's atmosphere as his siblings surround him, asking if he's okay. Myrtle says not to worry about him and to treat Diane, as he literally says she loves all of them so much, but just look at her. Look what I've done to her, as it shows Diane bloody and scratched up from Myrtle. But Diane says, no whipping yourself like that. I don't know if that was meant to be a pun, considering that Myrtle literally used a whip last chapter. Diane then says any scars I take from my precious kids would never hurt me at all. As Diane smiles and says, besides, this much doesn't even count as a scratch to me, as he's trying to be, cute and lightening the mood, but her daughters are just saying that she's just a monster if anything else, and I just like this little comedic moment as everyone just starts laughing over this whole instance. Tiori is relieved that things seem to be okay, as she was scared for a second. Nazian says that a mother's love truly is a marvel. Tiori then goes on to say that she's not just any mom, she's Diane, the serpent sin of envy. She and the Seven Deadly Sins managed to beat the Demon King himself. Nazians laughs, as Nazians looks at Myrtle and says, now I'm envy of him a little bit. I need the whole Nazians being King Diane's kid thing to be mentioned to Nazians, because I feel like him realizing that he now has this massive family that would love him no matter what, I feel like that would really be a nice thing for him. But I feel like that's going to be saved for when things calm down for the end of the arc. Myrtle then begins to start coughing and wheezing as before, and Diane asks if he has the pills on him. But he doesn't have any, he lost them in the fight. Tiori asks Nazian if he can help Myrtle, and Nazian says he could. He has gotten the effects of the Mullen that was needed to make the pills. Tiori tells Diane that Nazian can help Myrtle, but Nazian states that since they're stuck in Pollen Garden, they can't really get out. No way of getting in or anyone coming out. Belt is examining Pollen Garden as Zana just charges up, tells him to get out of the way, and then just kicks Pollen Garden as it ricochets throughout the forest. In a pretty hilarious looking scene, as Nazian and Tiori were just bounced back and forth inside of the Pollen Garden, and their wounds are being healed, but they're also getting injured at the exact same time, so I just find that hilarious. Diane tells the kids that they have to find King so he can get more of the pills, as well as breaking open Pollen Garden. It gives a brief rundown of where King and Sixtus have gone, as Sixtus went to the throne room to stop the Chaos assassins from taking the Drug of Yore, as King went off to take on the red-cloaked mage. Zana tries to rally the kids to go find King and help him, but Diane tells him to leave finding King to her, as she wants the rest of the kids to go and help out Sixtus. Belt says that Sixtus would be just fine, but Diane says, look, I'm worried, just go after it. And she then asks Myrtle to look after Nazian and Tiori while everyone is away. Now that's actually a really nice thing, because I do think this would give Nazians and Myrtle a good chance for a heart-to-heart, and maybe Myrtle will be the one to tell him that they are the child of King and Diane, which would be a very interesting thing. It could also help Myrtle explain fully why he had a bit of animosity towards Nazians for the time that he was around. We get a brief panel showcasing the Chaos Knights over the King's throne room, where they're about to fight Sixtus, as the rest of the Cayenne kids charge over to go and help Sixtus. And just like in this one instance, they're all just talking about how Diane's being a bit overprotective, and that Sixtus be enough to take out any of those weaklings that they've seen. And they even fully mentioned that Sixtus has enough power to take the throne of the Fairy Realm, which That actually does confirm, despite the fairy tree being the one that chooses the next fairy king, it would be interesting during the fact that Sixtus is a natural-born fairy from a fairy and a giant. It could be that the authority could be passed down from fairy king to fairy king in that instance. It could also be shown that he also has a sacred fairy tree made sword, so that could be a way of the sacred fairy tree making him like a candidate for the next fairy king without having to create its own fairy king like it did with King, Dahlia, and Gloxinia in that order, which is very interesting to think about. But we're back to the action with Sixtus taking on the cloaked figures, as he says Spirit Sword Magliostura, Form 2 Hummingbird, as it creates a giant typhoon with a bunch of miniature versions of his sword, cutting up a load of these hooded figures. Some of these hooded figures then launch elemental attacks towards Sixtus, but Sixtus motions his hands and creates the third form of his Spirit Sword, which is Hexagonal Wall. So I'm liking that this Spirit Sword is very different from King's Spirit Spear in terms of how it's being utilized and its shape. Heck, even the defensive form of his sword is different than King's, which would normally be Guardian, and to an extent Pollen Guardian, so it is very nice, and it does look like a sci-fi looking magical shield. If not, it looks like the magic shields that we see in Frieren. I'm rewatching Frieren, I just really wanted to bring that up. Go watch it. I'm planning to do a video on it at some point. Anyway, shameless plug to a video that may or may not be coming. Sixtus goes on to say, he didn't think to call anyone stronger than you, referring to the cloaked figures, because really, this feels like bullying the weak, and I don't like it much. And after Sixtus mentions this, 3 of the hooded figures begin to merge into one, surprising Sixtus as it launches a magical attack straight towards him. Now Sixtus still manages to block it with his third form of his Spirit Sword, and Sixtus is impressed, saying, "Not bad. If you had that all along, you should have broken it out sooner. But if there's that few of you left, you're kinda sunk, aren't you?" But in that instance, we get a 2-page spread with Sixtus surrounded by dozens of these hooded figures, as he is wondering when they got there. But in that instance, these mass horde of hooded figures then begin to merge together as well in that instance, as Sixtus launches his Form 1 Magliosturna straight towards the enemy. But in that instance, the fully merged Chaos Mage ends up creating a perfect cube around Sixtus, showcasing their hands now as they cast their spell. And they then cast 2 more spells. 4 Bouncing Elements, as it combines 4 elemental attacks into 1 elemental ball, and then uses Teleport to teleport it within the perfect cube right next to Sixtus, as the next page showcases this elemental cube bouncing back and forth between the walls, as it then explodes and breaks the perfect cube from the inside. And here's the thing, that is an impressive feat, as perfect cube is meant to be one of the primo defenses of the Demon Clan, so if a magical attack is strong enough to break through that thing, even from the inside, that is impressive even of itself. But as Sixtus is coming to after the explosion, wondering what that was, in the next page we see towering over him the 4th Knight of Peril, the White Knight from King Arthur's elites, finally making their appearance in the Fairy Realm arc. And I'm just gonna say this, I freaking called it. I stated a few videos ago that the strong possibility that one of these cloaked figures was the 4th Knight of Peril, and lo and behold, all of them were literally just this one knight split up into multiple weaker versions in order to use magical spells. And based off of how this knight's fighting style is like, this knight most likely primarily uses magical based attacks, and the fact that they're able to use it in not only an effective manner, but in different combinations in a very strategic way, is a really nice way to showcase just how strong this character is and how much of a threat they are. I'll talk more about this in a later portion of the video, and I might make a video in and of itself at some point because I really want to talk about the 4 perils now. But as Sixtus realizes who's towering above him, he then jumps and tries to get some distance between him and the White Knight. Sixtus says, "You were hiding your powers? Who are you?" As the knight finally makes themselves known by stating their full name, Warland. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Warland. Worlden. I'm going with Worldan. And they pronounce themselves as the White Knight of the 4 Evils. I'm going with 4 perils, it sounds cooler than 4 Evils. But we then get a panel of Sixtus in shock as we then get an image of blood splattering, as the White Knight states, and yes, just like Q, I hate to bully the weak. The final page is Worlden generating a magical sword that almost looks similar to Sixtus's, stabbing him straight through the chest, ending the chapter. Oh boy, now that was a good one. Now here's actually something very interesting. I think Nakaba, despite setting us up for the Four Perils not being anything too big, has set up not only Beltrop, but also Worlden as immense threats in this series. Now Pelgard we haven't seen go all out, and I will give Ironside his credit. He did manage to survive a hit from a nerfed Bon, even though it was enough to have him lose his breath and cough up blood and grasping his chest. That was good enough to give Ironside enough of a feat to actually be able to survive an attack like that, because if Bon was at full strength, Ironside would probably be dead. But I do like how we're not focusing on the Four Knights, we are focusing on Team Percival and the other Sins, but we're also building up the Four Perils. Pelgard is more of an ally-ish to an extent, but if he's deemed to have to try and fight the Four Knights and their allies, he will for his wife and kid. So full power Pelgard is going to come at some point. We also got Beltrop, who I actually have to give this from the Japanese Raw of Volume 16, and this was added, but Beltrop didn't cut the sky in that chapter. He cut the literal dimension they were in, meaning that Arthur has a knight with a magical sword, a magical ability that allows him to cut space itself, a spatial-based attack, which is already in and of itself incredibly powerful in the world of Seven Deadly Sins. So we're focusing a lot on the Four Perils and how strong they are. Now, next up we're going to see the rest of the Cayenne kids show up to help out Sixtus, and they're all going to get massacred probably. My main theory is that this knight is more so a mage and primarily uses magic, similar to how Gawain has a good balance of being a mage in her base form, but when she goes buff, she primarily uses physical blows and her sun-based attacks, but isn't above using magic as well, as a type of nice mixture. So for this knight, definitely magic-based. That final sword, it could have just been them copying. I saw this on Twitter, forgot who posted it, I think someone named Ray on Twitter, stated that there's a strong possibility that perhaps this knight is able to copy magical abilities, which is why they can use so many different spells, and why the last panel showcased a blade behind it that seemingly looks similar to Sixtus's blade. That might not be the case, but that is a very cool possibility. Either way, I'm just excited to see what happens next, because King's going to take out Kilbegin, and he's going to have to show up to save Sixtus and the kids. So I'm curious to see. This will probably be the final Peril Knight taking on two of the Sins for the climax of this arc, taking the Drug of Yore and booking it out of there for all we know. That's my prediction for how this arc will ultimately conclude, and we'll see how things go. I feel like the Cayenne kids are going to get themselves destroyed, even if they do try and help out Sixtus, and maybe Naziens could end up saving the day for all we know. Either way, this was a really incredible chapter. The action was great, and something that I got to mention was the fact that Worlden was literally splitting himself up in order to appear weaker, in order to slip past the defenses of the Fairy Realm and to not go under the notice of King. So that's already a good enough strategy in and of itself. But I spent the last, 4 minutes basically speculating and talking to you about my closing thoughts for this chapter. What did you guys think? Leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section down below. How do you feel about the White Knight's true introduction? How do you feel this arc is going to pan out? Do you think it's going to end off the way with the two Sins staying on the final Peril Knight? Leave your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below, and if you haven't already, like and subscribe, hit the notification bell for updates on future videos. Really helps, and it shows you guys enjoy the content I make here on the channel and shows you want to see more. The next chapter cannot come sooner, I swear.
Bye bye baby, my life. それなら僕と踊りませんか